Merry Christmas from the team at Cosmic Banter, the team of two, the dynamic duo. We've got little Ralphie here, not so little anymore, just woken up from a nap. But if you just bear with me a moment, Ralphie, remember we're going to do that little segment, the birthday shout-outs? It's just a new segment I want to try out. So we've got one listener here who I want to shout out. I think it's their birthday today, actually. Got it written down here. Lord Jesus Christ. Brother, happy birthday. Thank you for all of your support. I know you've been listening in. And hope you have a great day. And look, if anyone else has a birthday coming up, a friend with a birthday they want shouted out, want to make this bit of a new segment, really. See if we can, extend these intros as long as possible. How does that sound? No. Welcome to Season 1. We made it. Tonight's episode is one I recorded back in September, and it's with a guest called Brock. Now, Brock is based in Melbourne, where I was at the time. Well, not in September, but it was... Unfortunately, we didn't get to meet in person. Nevertheless, we did 3 different Zoom interviews, so this is part 1 of 3. And that's an awkward position, isn't it, Ralphie? Sorry. Our meeting was quite fortuitous, actually. There was a bit of a synchronicity there, which we get into. And I want you guys to just go away after listening to this episode and keep Brock's story in the back of your mind, alongside all these other stories that we share on Cosmic Banter, as we head into 2025, because I think that this is the last time we're going to be bickering over what those lights in the sky are. That's going to be by the by. I think 2025 is the year of the experiencer. People like Brock and others who I interview who have encountered the supernatural phenomenon at a really personal, intimate level. I think that we're going to come to an acceptance that there is a non-human intelligence present on Earth. We're going to have more and more high-level whistleblowers. We're going to have more and more sightings. We're going to head into January 2025 with hopefully the new administration in America giving us some proper updates on what the hell's going on in New Jersey at the moment with these drones. But being Christmas Day, it is Christmas Day, we're past midnight now. Merry Christmas again. You alright, Ralphie? Went to jump and he slipped off. This is an interesting timestamp, because I think when we reflect on Christmas Day 2025, we're going to look back at January and be like, man, that New Jersey drone story, that was cute. That was cute. That was a cute way to start the year, because boy, we did not see what was coming next. And I don't know what that is, but I feel it. Does that sound woo-woo? Surely you feel it too. Even beyond just the vibes, right? Surely the conversations you're having with people at parties, the stuff you're starting to see now on the legacy media. I'm trying to use the term legacy media instead of the mainstream media. But surely you're picking up on it now too, right? It's not just these sort of fun, entertaining podcasts like mine. This is real. And so I just hope that we go into 2025 with a bit more empathy and genuine intrigue into people's stories, people's personal stories, like Brock's tonight. And so just keep that in the back of your mind when you listen tonight. So without further ado, welcome to Season 1. We're carrying on the episode numbers. This is episode 10 of the Cosmic Banter podcast. I am your host, Steve, and the title of tonight's episode is The Alien Abduction. As ever, when the phenomenon decides to reach you, I hope you decide to reach out to Cosmic Banter. Until then, enjoy. Peace. All right, Brock, welcome to the Cosmic Banter podcast. Thanks so much for your time. How are you doing today, mate?
Good, thanks, Steve. It's really wonderful to be here.
Yeah. And look, we just before I let you get into your story, I mean, you've got a million different stories. I'm so excited to hear some of them. But I'll just give a bit of background for the listeners. Bit of a synchronicity, really, wasn't it? Our meeting.
Yeah, it is funny you should say that. I think if you're into this, and I guess this podcast, the listeners are into this kind of thing. Yeah, it seems to fall into place in a weird way, and it all seems too easy to be here, really. So yeah, I would definitely class this as a synchronicity, our meeting.
Well, specifically for me, you were on a shall we say a competitor's podcast? No, not at all. But on a prominent UFO podcast, which I already listened to quite religiously, called the UFO Chronicles by Nick Hunter, I believe his name is, isn't it? And yes. You appeared on the show a couple of years ago. Now, last year, I was binging this podcast and came across your episode, was the next one coming up, and you had an Aussie accent, and I thought, oh yeah, and then you mentioned Melbourne. I was in Melbourne at the time. I'm in New Zealand at the moment. I thought, oh, interesting. And then you proceeded to tell the craziest stories, and I had it noted down when I decided to create Cosmic Banter that a good person to try and hunt down would be yourself. And then I sort of put my feelers out. I'd just been sort of spamming TikTok comments and saying, hey, if you've had an experience, reach out to me, email me. And I don't use Facebook these days, but I thought there's plenty of groups. And so I decided to join found, I think it's called the one you're in, UFOs in Melbourne or something.
Something like that.
And I just said, look, and because I posted across a few different groups and really didn't get any engagement. And I just posted saying, look, I don't really use Facebook, so don't DM me, but email me if you've had an experience, because I'm starting this podcast. And I get this email from you, and you mentioned that you were on this podcast, UFO Chronicles, and it all just linked up. And I was like, oh my God, I had you in mind to interview. And you reached out to me without me proactively finding you first.
It's really strange that you were looking for me, and then I went and contacted you. I had no idea. And to make it even weirder, I haven't reached out to anybody else. I haven't been looking to be on a podcast. So it's strange in itself that I decided to reach out to you, and even the Facebook group, UFOs of Melbourne, or UFO Sightings of Melbourne. Maybe we should put a link to that.
Yeah.
That's the only group that I've joined, and I just sort of joined that like not long before I saw your ad, and then reached out to you. So it is, to me, it's a synchronicity. It's it's not like I was actively seeking out to be on a podcast.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. I just would have assumed that you'd already been a member for a number of years and stuff. And I thought, well, okay, the chances of me posting to a UFO group in Melbourne, and you being based in Melbourne, I guess there would have been a strong chance, or a chance, that you would have come across that. But no, I do think there was something more to it. And particularly if you only joined not long before I posted that. So that's really interesting. And anyway, that's just a bit of background between you and I, isn't it? But do you want to yeah, I mean you've got a million different stories, I know, but let's just recap some of your main prominent stories that really stand out to you, say prior to doing your last podcast, and then we may do a second one because I understand that you've had some events take place since then as well. But yeah, do you want to take it away?
Sure. I guess I'm going to start by talking about some missing time experiences that I've had, and I'm going to particularly concentrate on missing time experiences that were with other people, because I think that adds more credibility to the experience when it's not just you, it's somebody else that can say, yeah, I was there and that's what happened. So I guess I'm going to really quickly touch on my very first missing time experience. Was a strange one. And I'm not sure if I've heard this anywhere else before, but this was my mother told me this story, that when she was 8.5 months pregnant with myself and my twin sister, she had a missing time experience and she lost a whole day. She got up in the morning to go about her morning routine. And then she said that she found herself standing at her kitchen table, just staring out the window. And it was in the late afternoon. And she can't account for the day. None of the chores were done, and she doesn't know what happened. And then that was only 2 weeks later that I was born. So I'm calling that my first missing time experience, and she can account for that experience, but not what happened. So one of my earliest memories is of a missing time experience, and I'm not sure how old I was exactly, but I would have been, I think, about 4 years old. And I remember it distinctly because of the weirdness of it. And it's something that stuck in my mind as not knowing what happened. So I was sitting at the kitchen table with my mother, and it was evening, and the strangeness of it was that my sisters and my father were not around, and that's strange. I don't actually know where they were, but that was unusual in itself. And we're talking about objects in the night sky, like the moon and the stars, and she was giving her best attempt at explaining what they are to a 4-year-old and a 4-year-old's comprehension. And then she said, let's go outside and have a look, which I thought was a great idea. And so we went outside. It was nighttime, and we go into our back garden, and she's pointing out celestial objects. These are the stars, and that's the moon. And then I was looking up, and I said, what's that? And I was looking up at something that was, it's hard to describe it except to say it looked somewhat like an incredibly large, very bright star that would have had the apparent size of holding up, perhaps you could cover it with your thumb if you held your thumb out at arm's length. So it was very large. It definitely wasn't the moon, because we could see the moon. Definitely wasn't stars, because it was far too big and far too bright. And I said, what's that? And I distinctly remember hearing my mother say, I have no idea what that is. And we both just stared up at whatever this was. And then I woke up in the morning. And as a 4-year-old, I kind of didn't make too much of it. I guess I just didn't understand. In my 4-year-old mind, went, oh, well, it's morning. And then when I got out of bed, my mother said to me, it was the first thing she said, even before she said good morning. She said, do you remember going to bed last night? And I was, no. She said, that's really, really weird. So, and it always stuck with me, the strangeness of that. And I did think it was weird at the time, but being innocent and 4, I just put it down to, there's a lot about the world I don't know. So that was a very brief missing time experience. But when, and I'm going back to the late 90s now, when I was in my very early 20s, and I'm going to set the scene here. I had a great group of friends that I was friends with throughout high school, and one of them had this great place. It was in the country, and He had a great room for a party. It had a huge pool table. There was a bar set up and great stereo, and it was really a great place for a party. And we would meet up there really regularly we'd invite girls over and have a great night. And that was a pretty regular thing to do. I must have been there, I don't know, many, many times. Anyway, on this particular evening, I arrived and I had a 6-pack of beer in my hand, and I went and put that in the fridge under the bar, and I said hello to everybody. And at that time I smoked. So don't smoke. It's terrible, bad for you. And I went out to the side door of this house, and I stepped out onto the landing and I lit a cigarette, and I looked up in the sky, and it was a uniformly overcast night, and there were no stars except for straight in front of me at a slight angle. There was a red light, and although I hadn't seen that kind of light at the time, now I would say it looked like the light from a laser pointer that you use in a lecture. And it looked like that. It was a shimmery red light. I'm staring at it on a cigarette, and I'm looking at it like, what is that? And then this thought came into my head, which is totally irrational, that it was something to do with the cloud layer, and the thickness of it was allowing just this particular starlight to shine through, and the cloud made it look red like that, which is wacky and doesn't sound right at all. And if I heard somebody say that, I would doubt that that was the case. But to me, that seemed totally plausible for some weird reason. Then the cigarette fell out of my mouth, and I had this really incredible thought in my head. I must walk home as quickly as possible. And I marched off the steps down the driveway, and I was power walking as fast as I could, almost breaking into a run, thinking, I must walk home. I must walk home as fast as I can. And that thought just kept going in my head, and I didn't question it. I just did it. Now, the weird thing was, apart from just arriving at your friend's house, was I lived literally 50 kilometers away. And it was nighttime in the country. There's just no way I'm walking that. It's just not something that you would do. And as I was thinking this and power marching down the road as fast as I could, that was it. It was a cutscene, and I opened my eyes, and in front of me, I could just see this slate gray color, and I felt unbelievably cold. And I realized that I was laying on the floor underneath the pool table in this room where we all partied, and everybody had left and the party was over, and I was on the floor under the pool table, incredibly cold, unbelievably cold. And the first thought that came into my head was, I have somehow passed out under the pool table, and this is what hypothermia feels like. And then a thought came into my head, which was weird because it was not, I didn't feel like it was my own thought. And it came into my head and said, if you stay here, you will die. And that kind of freaked me out. And I was trying to piece together what had happened, what was happening. And it's not like I'd ever passed out from drinking, or certainly not with a 6-pack of beer. And I just couldn't understand what was happening. And so I could barely move, like really barely move. And I tried my best to roll over from lying on my back to lying on my stomach. And I was thinking to myself, this must be what happens when you have hypothermia. You can't move. And the weird thing about the coldness was, and which is why I concluded it must be hypothermia, was when you're cold, normally your fingertips and your toes are the coldest parts of you, and the core is the warmest part of you. This was the opposite. My core felt like ice, and my fingertips and my toes actually felt hot. And so I thought, this must be what hypothermia is like. And that was what was going in my mind. And I thought, if I don't move, if I lay here, I probably will die overnight before somebody comes and finds me. So I thought the only thing I can do is try to crawl and get some help. So I was lying on my stomach at this point, and I managed to get with my forearms to sort of drag myself towards the door. And I remember looking at the door thinking, oh my God, I hope I can do this. And by the time I dragged myself to the door, I was able to get up onto my hands and knees, and crawl out the door along the hallway. And by the time I got to the staircase leading up to the guest bedroom, I was able to get onto my hands and like somehow stagger up the stairs. And I'm thinking as I'm going up the stairs, hand over hand, I was thinking to myself, what happened? How could this have happened? And why would my friends leave me there? That's not something they would do. These are really good people. They would not leave me under the pool table. If I had passed out, they surely would have helped me to bed. And I was thinking, this is so strange. I don't understand why this is happening. And what really confused me and kind of freaked me out was when I got upstairs to bed, I was able to stand at that point and feeling the effects of the cold sort of wash away from me. But as I got undressed, I was able to see that my underwear was on inside out. Very plainly, my underwear was on inside out. That scared me. And the reason that scared me was because I thought, oh my God, whatever has happened, it's involved me having my underwear off, and I've somehow put them on back to front and inside out. And I don't know about you, but that's not something I've ever accidentally done in my life. And no. I was looking at that thinking, oh my God, these girls here, I probably really offended them. This is terrible. What has happened? Why can't I remember what's happened? And I was really concerned, and I thought, well, the only thing I can really do about it now is go to bed and get up in the morning and apologize to everybody for what I've done, and explain I have no recollection of it. So I went to bed and I woke up in the morning feeling perfectly fine, and I was one of the first up, and I went downstairs, and there's the host in the kitchen making breakfast, and he took one look at me and said, "Brock, what are you doing here?" And I said, what did I do last night? And he said, I thought you went home. I thought you just drove home. You came and said hello. You put your beer in the fridge, and then you were gone. We just thought you drove home. Your beer's still in the fridge.
Wow.
And so I'm like, so I didn't drink. And I was I was thoroughly confused. He was confused that I was there. I was confused at what was going on, and I was just trying to, my brain couldn't figure out what was happening. And he was surprised to see me. And then as the guests came downstairs, they all said the same thing. Oh, what are you doing here? We thought you went home. And I just said, I have no idea what I did last night. Do you guys remember what I did last night? And they said, well, you weren't here. We have no idea. And I guess they all must have thought I was being a bit weird. And I was never able to access what happened. And for years, I fought to get some kind of memory as to what happened that night, and I couldn't. And that wasn't until I went on to Nick Hunter's podcast, and they were able to organize some regressive hypnosis, and I was able to recall what happened, which has shocked me. But we'll talk about that at another point, unless you want me to tell that story now. But that really shocked me.
Well, I'm really intrigued to hear that. Let's come back to that in another episode, seeing as that was sort of since you did that podcast. But that's crazy. I mean, I've heard a lot of stories of missing time, and I think that on surface level rather, they're not necessarily that compelling, because you can write it off as, well, you just mentioned that you'd brought round a six-pack, you probably blacked out or whatever it may be. But all these other elements to it, the fact that your beer was still in the fridge, that you started to walk home but woke up under the table, and then your friends realized that you were still there, and as far as they were concerned, you weren't there the entire night. And the underwear.
Yeah.
So there's so many factors there at play, right?
I hadn't had anything to drink. I hadn't had any time to have anything to drink. From their perspective, I arrived, said hello, and was gone. And obviously I'd driven there. I wasn't going to drink on the way there. I the idea of choosing to walk 50 kilometers plus home when my car is there, it's all weird. And nobody saw me for the entire night. So, you could assume that they were playing pool. And if it was anything like any other night, which I have no reason to believe it was anything other than a normal night there, then that would have gone on for hours of dancing and singing and playing pool and having a great time. So I was gone for, I'm assuming, hours. And my estimation would have been sometime around 4 or 5 in the morning when I woke up underneath the pool table. And so the confirmation from everybody there that I wasn't present, the confirmation that the beer that I brought with me was still in the fridge, it says to me that I wasn't drinking and I wasn't running around in the bush somewhere.
Yeah.
And my clothes, my shoes weren't dirty, so it's not like I was running around in the bush. Wherever I was, it wasn't there. So
Brock, if you don't mind, I think I would like to, while we're in the flow of that story, I am really curious to hear your hypnosis experience and understanding what happened. Are you comfortable sharing that?
I am. I have to say, for people that are considering undergoing hypnosis, the experience was amazing in that how they took me through it and being able to recall what I could recall. The detail of it was really confronting, and but the end result of it was they offered me more hypnosis sessions to uncover more memories of more missing time experiences, but I never took them up on the offer because what came out of this single session has shocked me to my core. And years later, every single day, I find myself jolting at the recollection of what happened. And it's been a really shocking thing to realize. And it's not like the recall is, it seems like I had always remembered it, but just somehow couldn't access it. But through the techniques, I was able under hypnosis to recall what happened. So I guess I'll start where
only if you're comfortable.
I'm comfortable with it. I live with it every day. So
wow.
It won't make any difference to talk about it. Okay. I think it'll probably be a good release for me to get it off my chest. So if we go back to me arriving, saying hello, stepping out to the side door to have a cigarette, seeing a red light in the sky, suddenly thinking I must walk home. And to start from that point, what I recall happening was instead of walking home, I power walked as fast as I could to the end of the street where there was a T intersection, and across the road from there was a youth camp, a school campground, which was obviously unoccupied at the time, and it just consisted of a pretty basic cleared area of land and some bungalow type accommodation and a few other structures. And I walked all the way up to the gate and could peer through the bush and the trees and see a really bright light on the ground, a bright, brilliant white light on the ground that was streaming through the trees. And without even thinking of anything, I really had a feeling of blankness. I climbed the gate and walked as quickly as I could and found myself heading towards this light. And the light was really strange in that at first it seemed gigantic, like the size of a house, but it seemed that as I got closer, it got smaller and smaller and smaller. And I kept my eye on this light and I kept walking towards it as quickly as I could. And in hypnosis, it's actually a really strange feeling because the level of detail, I remember every single leaf, every single branch, every single twig I passed. The detail is astonishing what your brain actually stores. And I was going towards this light, and I reached it, and it was as if it was a pinpoint of light on the ground, and I'm staring down at it with the most blank brain ever. I don't think I've ever not thought a thought, but I was just looking at it. And then I looked up, and overhead was a craft, which I guess it sounds cliched, although I'd never seen one until then. It was a black triangle, but it was not, it's hard to describe the texture of the surface. I estimate it to be about 30 meters over my head, and it was probably about 60 meters on each side of the triangle. So 60 meters on a side, and probably about 10 meters thick. So it was big, and it had a large white light in the center and white lights on each of the corners, but it also had randomly dispersed rainbow colored smaller lights underneath it, which seemed to be moving around in a weird way. And it had a strange texture to its surface. It wasn't smooth. It was really, really strange. And there was, at that time, I became aware of a presence that was behind me, and I didn't see it at that time. It wasn't until later, but I felt the presence of something behind me, and I could sort of, there was some kind of interplay between me and it, and it was, I got the impression, although there weren't words, the impression was that it was not that pleased to be here and to be doing this. It was more, let's get this going, let's get this done. And it's hard to describe. That's just how I felt. That's what this thing felt.
Was this, sorry to interject, Brock, had you seen this presence, or it literally was just a presence that you felt?
It was standing behind me. I felt it standing behind me. I can't explain it any other way, that I was sure that if I turned around, I would see this thing. I didn't turn around. I suddenly and strangely found myself not standing, but floating just above the surface of this craft. And I was able to look at it and see that it looked like some kind of glassy melted rock, perhaps like black solidified lava. It was very weird. It was very, very weird to look at. And I feel like, although I understand how crazy this sounds, but this is just my experience. It felt like I was standing up on the underside of this craft, so my head would have been pointed towards the ground, although it felt like I was orientated in the right direction. That's all I can say. That's what I was experiencing. And then suddenly, as if a switch was flicked, I was inside, and the inside was, I was in a large room that was dark, and I couldn't see all of the edges, the corners. The floor was a really dark, brilliant blue color, an uncanny blue. It's the deepest, most amazing blue I've ever seen. And I was standing there. I honestly didn't think to move. I don't know why. I just didn't do anything except stand there. I didn't feel immobilized. I just felt nothing. And what was going through my head was, I should be worried about this. This isn't right. This isn't normal. Why, as I'm looking around, why am I not that worried? And if I was to say, there was a there was a strange feeling of, it's not good, but you're going to be okay. And there was a feeling of, I just need to go, the way out of this is to go through it. And some kind of sense of, like, it wasn't completely alien, pardon the pun. It was something that there's some kind of familiarity about it. And as I'm standing there, I could see, as cliched as it sounds, I could see a single table, which seemed to be on a pedestal that was formed out of whatever this blue substance was on the floor. Honestly, that it looked like a stainless steel top. And there were, just beyond that, 3 entities that I wouldn't say they looked like what you would see on the internet as a classic grey, although they did have incredibly large black eyes that seemed to be the dominant feature. They had like a weird blue, grey, browny beige look about them. No real discernible nose, no ears that I could see. Their mouth was tiny, and it was just a thin slit, which had slightly curved up on the edge, almost kind of like a flat line with a tick at the end. It was hard. When you're looking at something you've never seen before, it was just so odd. And they were standing there staring back at me, and I'm thinking this whole time, this isn't right. This isn't what's meant to be happening, but not really reacting. I should have been terrified. I should have been freaking out, but nothing like that was going through my head. And then they all, and this kind of did freak me out. When they moved, they indicated to the table, and it was clear that they were indicating for me to go to the table, but they did it in perfect unison, as if all 3 of them were somehow connected together. It was, and it scared me, because it made me think that they were like robots. They weren't people, or it made me feel like they were robots, and it really scared me. And at that, I felt the presence that I initially felt behind me before being inside the craft. I felt again, and I felt it not calm me, but numb, take away, like manage. I know I'm not doing a great job of explaining it, but it was very, very strange, very, very strange. And at that, the 3 on the other side of the table, 2 of them came around one either side and led me to the table, helped me up on the table, and they took samples of me. And it was horrifying, in so much that there appeared to be something that resembled something like a robotic arm that you would see in a factory that builds cars, except it had a skin-like coating on it that was this horrible bone white color, and it was cracked and dry, like it had some kind of skin condition. But at the end of it wasn't a hand, it was more like an eye of some kind, and it looked menacing, and it was looking at me, and I couldn't do anything about it. And I don't really feel like I was paralyzed. I just didn't think to move, which is just so weird. And they, whilst being on the table, this eye looks at me, like scanning me or something, just looked me all over, and it disappeared into the darkness. And something came down, and it's actually a lot more difficult to discuss than I realized, but something
You're doing great. You're
it,
doing great.
thank you. Something came down, and it very painfully put something that I couldn't really see, but I felt like it put a needle into my testicles, and I don't know what, but it really hurt. And at the same time that was happening, this um, single entity was behind me, and I couldn't see it, but it was trying not to calm me, but to um, like help me not care or something. Try to manage it somehow. And when that was over, they did something to my leg, which was hard to see from my perspective, but um, it it felt like something. It wasn't digging in, but opening up my thigh, my left thigh, and I could feel it, but I felt no pain, but I could feel it, and um, they did something there. I saw a piece of black gauze, looked like black gauze, a rectangular piece of black gauze float down towards my leg at one point. I'm not sure what that was. They then rolled me onto my right shoulder, so I was laying on my side, and did something to where my kidneys would be, and it was ridiculously, unbelievably painful. And I thought, that's it, I'm dead. I'm not going to survive. And at that point, um, I'm not exactly sure how to explain it, other than I felt like this might be what an out of body experience is like, where I found myself um, away and up in the corner of this room looking down at myself, and I felt nothing. And I think what they did was take my consciousness out of me somehow so I could endure what they were doing. And what I then could see was behind me was another protuberance that had come down from the darkness above. It wasn't white though; it was black, and it did move in a weird, jerky, mechanical fashion, and I couldn't. Whatever was on the end of it was in my back, and uh, that went on for a minute or so, and then it really suddenly retracted away, and I found myself back in my body, and I felt no pain at that point, and they helped me up. And I was naked. I have no. I wasn't able to recover how my clothes came off. Um, so yeah, this was happening, and I didn't care, which is also really strange. They indicated, these three beings indicated in unison. It's just so scary to see them move perfectly like they did. That I should go through a darkened doorway, to which I really didn't want to go. And then they explained to me, not so much explained, but sort of showed me that if I do this, then this is the way home. This is the way back home. So I walked through the door thinking, whatever's on the other side of here, I couldn't see. And I was thinking to them, if this isn't that bad, why don't you go through the door? And, but I really felt like I had like the only way through this was to cooperate. And I went through the door. The ground felt warm, felt the same temperature as me. Didn't feel cold, didn't feel smooth, didn't feel rough, just unusual. Maybe somewhat like not a plastic, not a ceramic, something. It had a matte feeling to it. I walked through this darkened doorway, but it was like a sheet of darkness rather than the dark room, because the room on the inside was, it really shocked me because on the other side of the room, there appeared to be no gravity, and I fell into it and was floating, and it was, I couldn't touch anything, and I was scared that I was going to be stuck there and nobody was coming to get me. And the brightness was coming from, I'm assuming it was the earth. And it was a very bright white and blue ball, which appeared to be outside of like an aperture, an opening, or a window. I'm not sure what. It was just so my brain was just not coping with what was going on. And in the center of the room, there was something that it resembled like millions and millions of shards of tubes of glass, like small straws of glass, all put together in a way that I could see. It was almost like I could see how I could fit into it. And my job was to go into that for whatever reason. And I could feel that, although it felt like there was no gravity at first, I actually could feel that there did appear to be some kind of gravity, but it was moving me towards this structure, this glass-like structure, very slowly. And I got to it and sort of fell onto it or into it. And when I fell into it, it covered me in more of these hair like fine shards of glass, and it completely covered me like a static electricity was pulling all of this stuff onto me. And the more I tried to brush it off, the worse it got onto me and completely covered me. And I really was terrified, thinking that this is going to go into my eyes and into my mouth, and this will be terrible. But it didn't. Somehow it didn't. And that seemed to end in a way. And I found myself, I'm not really sure how, but found myself moving back towards this darkened entrance. And as I passed through, this stuff was no longer on me. I have no idea what happened, where that went. I was not going to question that. I was just glad to get the hell out. And these three beings were there, and they in unison indicated in their creepy way that I should go this way. And I hurried along thinking, oh God, please be over. Please get me out of here. And I passed an edge of I guess a wall, an edge. And around the corner of that edge was another being, and it looked horrifying. It was wearing some kind of loose fitting all in one, but it looked like it was made out of some kind of metallic orange fiber. It was shiny, metallic, very fine orange mesh, and it had red collars to its cuffs and around its neck. And I couldn't really see its feet for some reason. I don't know, but it had a really, really large head, and its head was in the shape of a classic old-fashioned light globe. It was really big, and it had big eyes that were set more forwards and less to the side than the other ones. And the really, well, it had two features that were really shocking. And one was it had a hologram on its forehead of some kind that was sort of floating in front of its forehead of some kind of symbols. I have no idea what it could have been, but it had some kind of hologram in front of its forehead. It was glowing quite a nice blue color, a lighter blue. Its mouth, though, looked very scary to me. It had its mouth was more round rather than a slit. It was like an orifice, and it was dry and cracked, like dry cracked lips, and it looked really, really terrifying. And I was looking at the mouth, and it approached me, and it gave me some kind of like a brain attack or something. Um, Whatever it was, it took me down to the ground, um, and I really, really thought, finally, this is it. I'm dead here. There's no way I can survive this, and it felt um like it was just ramming something into my brain directly in a way that felt like I was going to die. And
And you
I,
physically you fell
yeah,
to the ground
I went down.
in the craft. You're still in the
Yes,
craft at this
yes,
stage.
yes.
And at
it
this
took,
stage, did you have any idea of its intention? Were there any telepathic messages or anything, or just
the
this?
the the intention from these three, and as strange as this sound, I actually got a really, like a as creepy as they were, there was this feeling of like a I actually felt like they cared about me. Like they I didn't feel like I thought. It was just so strange. It's the whole thing was just so bizarre. I felt good intentions from these three. There
Mm-hmm.
was one that was behind me, felt like, if anything, it hated me. Um,
Mm,
this weird creature with the hologram uh, felt like an authority figure.
mm-hmm.
When you meet an authority figure, they have that air of authority, and you sort of
Mm.
you could feel they command respect, and there was no words per se. It was just it was more a knowing that what to do or what to feel or what to think or what to say. And yeah, so this thing rammed something into my brain that just knocked me for six, and it just totally scrambled everything. And I was just like drooling on the floor, not with zero intention of anything. And at that, these three entities, one of them remained standing, but the other two came up beside me. They helped me to my feet. They took me to, I wouldn't call it a door, I wouldn't call it a window. It was as if there was just a hole in the side of the craft, which I'm not sure if it was always there or if I didn't notice it or if it appeared. It was there, and I could see down to the ground, but it was like 50 meters down to the ground, and they were trying to push me out. And
Down to the ground of Earth.
yes, down
Like,
back to earth, back to earth, back to where they picked me up
so
from.
in this time frame, because you described earlier, sort of going through that sort of shadow, that dark shadowy veil, and then seeing what you believe to have been Earth, sort of bluey white light, sort of in the distance, right? So, do you believe that they had taken you up, and then during this interaction, that also then come back down to Earth?
Yes, that's. I I mean, I've never seen Earth from space. Obviously, um, I think that's what it was. It was very bright. It was really what, and that's also, if that was what it looked like. If I was in space, it was on the daytime side, and I was on the nighttime side. So, if that had happened, they'd somehow whisked me all the way over there and then all the way back again in a very short period of time. It's actually a good point. I hadn't considered that they must have done that in a short space of time.
Yeah.
And so I found myself resisting and I was pushing back against these guys for the first time. And they gave me an impression that that's perfectly fine. This is what is going to happen, and you're going to leave like this. And with that, they gave me a shove, and I traveled down as light as a feather all the way to the ground, and I touched down like with my foot, my toe, just ever so gently, and it was perfectly done. And I thought that was when I sort of started to get my faculties back, and I thought, wow, that was perfect. These guys have really got some cool stuff going on here, because that was perfectly done. And uh, then I had this knowing that it was time to go, and it was over. And as I took a step, I didn't. I more like I still had whatever effect had taken me down to the ground so lightly. That was still present, and I stepped, not one step, but like 5 meters. I just sort of glided along the ground, and my other foot just touched the ground, and I glided again. And I was thinking, wow, this is just the best. And I had this great feeling, this is just the best. And I got to the edge of this place where I was at, and I was able to get over the gate with just the lightest touch, like I weighed only a few grams. And as I got down the road, it felt like the effect was wearing off, and my steps got a little bit heavier. And I was getting down the road, and then I sort of felt that I was pretty much back on the ground fully and under my own control. And at that time, the fear, what I would consider the real fear to be, started to come over me. And I was really, although I was out and away, I still wasn't back to where I needed to be. And I started to think, oh my God, I've just got to get back up to the house. I've got to get back in the door. I've just got to get back in there. Once I'm in there, I'll be safe. And I could feel, for the first time, the coldness, and I could feel this intense cold. I was really starting to freak out and thinking in more of a, I guess it's almost, you revert to almost like a childlike state in the way you're thinking at this time. Or at least I was anyway, just concentrating on, just do whatever it takes to get back inside, just get back inside, just get back inside. I'm thinking to myself. And when I got to the driveway, instead of running up the driveway, I was stopped somehow. I don't even know how to describe it. They put me on autopilot, cruise control or something like that. And they got me up the driveway, through the door, back along the hallway, into the room and under the pool table. But they floated and slid me under there just perfectly. And they opened and shut the doors behind me just perfectly, soundlessly. Wow. And slid me under there, and then laid me down. And that's pretty much where my actual memory, recombines with that recovered memory.
Back. Yeah. Oh my God.
Oh my God. Every single day, that's exactly what I find myself saying. Oh my God. When I'm suddenly jarred in my mind, remembering that actually happened. And it's never ever left me, and has scared the shit out of me, because there's no control. I had no way of doing anything about that. I couldn't have done anything if I wanted to, and I didn't even think to do anything about it. Whatever they did without my permission and without my consent, and completely, I couldn't do anything about it. And that's what really scares me, is that loss of control, that inability to, like, at any time they could do that, and I can't do anything about it. And in a way, I'm really glad that they had taken that memory from me, and it was my own fault for getting it back. And now I can understand why they took that from me, because it's,
Mm.
even decades later, it scares the absolute shit out of me.
Well, use the words, it's my fault for, digging into it. I'd go easy on yourself. I mean, especially decades later, I think I would be very curious if someone offered me, a hypnotherapist, a hypnotist that specializes in these sorts of experiences. I mean, this is such a common story of missing time, and sometimes that's all it is, and it's just a strange story. But then missing time, and then when someone regains their consciousness, something's different. Like they're back in the car, but grandma is in the driver's seat and she's supposed to be in the passenger seat. Or in your case, your underwear, as funny as that sounds, but that's like in the moment, that was a telltale for you. And
Yes.
then from what you've just described, relearning what had happened under hypnosis, that now I imagine makes a lot of sense. How much, firstly, that must be, that sounds so traumatic, but there must be two layers to the trauma of the first of, well, let me ask you that. Obviously after the hypnosis session and since then, this has been a traumatizing memory, as you now have this memory. Even though they did whatever they did to remove that memory from you at the time, which I've heard a lot of. A lot of these, these cases involve a similar thing. But do you think that somewhere deep in your subconscious, that scary experience was held? Like, did you feel that it affected you, even though you couldn't remember what had happened?
At the time, I did have a sense something has happened, and there was a feeling of unease and a feeling of, I guess, fear of the unknown. I knew something had happened. I just didn't know what. And when you're faced with a mystery, you can't immediately say, "Oh, something terrible happened, therefore I feel this or I feel that." You don't know, and it felt like something wrong had taken place, but I couldn't identify what it was. So that had stayed with me my whole life, and I guess that's why I chose that as to be the first thing to look at under hypnosis.
Does it scare you, the idea of, we haven't even got to your other experiences of missing time, but I can understand why you wouldn't want to, undergo hypnosis and sort of uncover those. Does that scare you, the thought of, well, I don't know and I don't want to know because of what I've learned about this experience, but what could it have been? Does that play on your mind?
How I have come to terms with it or cope with it is the realization that I wasn't left with any lasting harm. I wasn't physically harmed, although they did something to me and that really hurt. I wasn't scarred. I wasn't disfigured. Perhaps they were trying to save my life. I really don't know. But they haven't physically done anything bad to me. And if anything, I would say that they were trying to make whatever they were doing easier on me. There are still blanked out sections of that experience because I have no recollection of how I got undressed and dressed in the first place. So,
Okay.
and my timeline of what I experienced doesn't necessarily match with how long I appeared to have been gone. So,
Yes.
yes,
So that was going to be a question, sorry, that I was going to ask, exactly that. So when you arrive at this party, it's nighttime, presumably. Roughly what hour?
Oh, it would have been not long after dark, and I would have assumed it wouldn't have. It would have been somewhere around about 6:30 or 7 o'clock at night, and that was usual.
Winter.
That was we'd done the same thing many times, so yeah, that was usual.
And when you next remembered, the next part of the night that you remembered was morning, was
Yep.
under the table now, and so it was daylight at this point.
No, it
Now,
wasn't. It wasn't
no.
daylight. It wasn't daylight. Um, if being that it was dark when I arrived at 6:30, it's winter time, so for
Mm-mm.
part of the year, and so it wouldn't have gotten light until 7 o'clock, 7:30 in the morning. Anyway, um, everybody had gone to bed, so that puts normally we would go until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and then all drift off to bed. So sometime before sunrise and after 3 or 4 in the morning. So I put it maybe around about 5 o'clock in the morning.
Do
And
you recall? Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
and I uh, came downstairs at about 10 o'clock in the morning. So I hadn't had much sleep, although I felt fully rested. Strangely,
Okay, because that was going to be my question. I suppose it would be hard to quantify when you were floated through the house and back under the table, how long, what time that was, and how long you were asleep for. Um, but when you came down, I guess it was still nighttime the whole time,
yes.
and then you felt like you woke up, but you're not sure how many hours in between occurred.
No, I can only estimate because I don't have. I mean that from when I if I arrived at 6:30 at night, it would have been before 6:45 that I had lit a cigarette and found myself power walking down the road. So
Mm.
if I had estimate the earliest I would have been back would have been 3 o'clock in the morning. So
That's the
so
earliest.
yeah, yeah. So we can say it's quite a length of time. It's certainly a lot longer than my recalled timeline.
Yeah, because when you're undergoing this hypnosis, the events you've described, I mean, obviously you're retelling it in a story is going to sound quicker than the actual experience, of course. But um, I'm just trying to work out, what's that? 6 hours. Well, no, more eight hours at least.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like it would have required 8 hours, or what you've described
When
wouldn't have
when I
filled
was
eight
undergoing the
hours.
hypnosis, it was very much like reliving it again. And
Mm.
when I look at the recording and the transcript of the hypnosis, that was about 2 hours. So the timeline of my recalled experience was about 2 hours, although the timeline of the missing time was much longer than that. So something happened,
Interesting.
and that I don't recall getting undressed or dressed. So something
Yes.
that happened that I don't
Not
recall.
that that not that that would have taken 4 hours or something, but
No, no, of course not. No, so
no, but
something happened. I
maybe
just
just this idea of time is distorted, and God,
time dilation.
it's
Who knows?
yeah.
Something happened, but um, I'd become naked at one point and was dressed as I was leaving. So something happened. I just don't know what it was, and I can't recall it, and I'm not sure if I want to, because if it was that terrifying that what I do recall, what have they still left blank?
Wow.
Could it be worse? What I did get out of that was a flash of a memory of another missing time experience that I hadn't sought to delve into at that time, and that came back maybe a couple of months after the hypnosis. Was a brief flash of a recovered memory from a missing time experience that I had with another guy. Would you like me to talk about that?
Yes. Yeah. I would. And just before you do, just had a couple more questions on that
Go for it.
story. I think you did really well at describing these beings. I appreciate that when you're seeing something, as you say, for the first time, something so foreign. How do you even begin to describe it? We do have, the classic greys in pop culture, and not just pop culture, but in real, supposedly, real encounters and stories. So we do have something to work off. So a lot of the features you mentioned, tick those boxes. The prominent, large black eyes, um, and you mentioned the one at the end that sort of gave you that so-called brain attack. That was sort of the one with authority. Its eyes were more centered, whereas the other three were more sort of to the side of their heads. Is that correct?
The three that looked the same and moved the same, the eyes were really very, very large and were more of you hear the cliched almond shaped, but they kind of wrapped back around the side of the head. I would imagine that they probably got pretty good peripheral vision. The other one that had the incredibly huge light globe shaped head, the eyes were oval shaped, tilted on an angle, and were closer in. They didn't wrap around quite so much. They weren't quite as large, but they were still huge, and they were black as well. And they had an unusual texture, that not almost like some kind of liquid behind glass. It would be how I would describe the eyes.
Okay.
And also on the three that moved in unison, they also walked in unison. I want to point out, and their feet they didn't have toes. It was more like one, like perhaps they had some kind of covering, and they didn't have toes. Their foot was just one big toe-free foot. Well, when I say big, it was still, they were small. They were small.
Okay.
They looked kind of like, if I had have been free and able to move, I could have, you could snap them in half. They didn't. They looked pretty frail, and their skin was like a weird, pasty, beigey, bluey gray, very unusual. I can't point to something that we know of in our lives and say it looked like that. It's something it's very, very difficult to describe. The feet were really strange, and three fingers, not four fingers, and one thumb, but it was more different, like almost like the thumb was in towards the center of the hand more.
Okay.
And again, they looked like you would tear the arm off this thing in an arm wrestle,
Just skin and bones.
Pretty delicate looking. Yeah. Pretty delicate looking. And so much so you look at them and think, how do they hold their head up? But however they do.
Well, what you've described, I know that there's no, creatures on Earth that resemble that, but I think even to people who aren't particularly interested in this topic, or are newly interested, perhaps, I think most people are familiar with the classic grey. For those who are watching, on my Zoom background screen, where is my finger there?
Yeah, did not look like that guy. Did not look like that guy.
Okay. Well, that's what I'm interested to know, because everything you've sort of described, just piecing it together, I know the skin was not perfectly grey. It was a greyish blue. The three digits and the thumb, the large black eyes, skinny, that all to me sounds like the classic small grey. So would you be able to elaborate on why? Okay, everyone can picture this classic small grey. It's in movies, it's in depictions of people's experiences. So I think most people can sort of picture that. So what were the key differences? I mean, how tall were they? Um,
Okay. If we're talking about a classic grey like you would find on the internet if you did a Google search,
mm,
uh, they were equally as skinny to the point of looking emaciated. Like if that was a person, you would say they had anorexia.
mm,
They were about they would have been up to about here on me. So
so that's just for the audio listeners. That's just up to your
oh yeah,
upper chest.
just my upper chest. Yeah, for
Uh-huh.
everybody listening, and that would have put them like really short. So like
How
4 foot.
tall are you?
Oh no, not that tall. That would have put them around about 4 foot high at the
Okay,
most, and
right.
they were all exactly the same. They were absolute photocopies of each other.
Almost like drones or worker bees or
It
something.
scared me, man. Whenever I think that's one of the things that scares me, that really scares me. To me, they were like robots. They, they didn't
Why
necessarily.
did that scare you? Why did that scare you? The fact that they were sort of robotic and moved in unison. Like, yeah, that
This,
sounds completely bizarre, but what was so scary about it?
that's a good question. I think because they moved in unison that, and they did that so perfectly, as if they were connected together somehow. If they can do that, what else can they do that I don't know about? And
Mm,
there was a definite unknown danger feeling to that, because we can see people move and we're used to how people move, and there's some kind of safety in knowing what the limits of what people can do are. But it felt dangerous that I didn't know what these things could do, what they were capable of. I got a sense that they liked me. I got a sense of, if anything, they sort of were sort of childlike in the way that they felt towards me.
okay,
Um, if anything, their mouth looked like the tiniest bit of like the hint of a smile. Um,
okay.
but the perfection of the movement, all I could think of was these things are robots, and that scared me
Mm,
because I didn't know what else they could do, and I
uh,
just felt vulnerable, even though I could have, like, you would win in a fight. You could just snap them in half, not a problem. But something about how they moved just made me feel unsafe. Although
mm,
there was no obvious thing that they were doing that felt harmful, it was just so unusual, and I couldn't like put it in a box. So my brain just went, that's dangerous.
That makes sense now. Um, Brock, I think this is perfect. This is exactly this sort of story that I was after. I know you have a million different stories. The one you mentioned where a couple of weeks after the hypnosis, another sort of memory came to you. I propose we pick that up at another conversation because I think in a lot of these types of interviews and podcasts that I've listened to, you have a guest like yourself telling this really compelling story, but there's so many questions as a listener for me when I'm listening to these stories. There's so many more questions that are left unanswered. And if you don't mind, I just want to use the rest of the time just to sort of explore that a little bit more. Is that okay?
Of course. I mean, look, Steve, you think you've got unanswered questions.
Yeah,
Yeah,
true.
I'm here to try to get this off my chest, and I hope somebody out there
Yeah.
listening can add a comment or shed some light on something. What I'm really hoping out of this is that somebody can contact you and say, yes, I've seen that, or yes, that happened to me, or maybe they'll say, yeah, my dad told me that happened to him, or something. But as far as your questions, yeah, fire away, Steve. What
I
did you have?
mean, just a comment on that. I don't know how. Presumably, you're fairly interested in this topic because you've experienced so much firsthand. But I don't know how many other stories you've listened to, that sort of story you've shared, not to diminish it at all, but in the world of sort of abductions and UFOs and aliens, that's a in line with a lot of what people experience. It involves missing time, and whether it be hypnosis that they uncover the memory, or whether that sort of comes back to them another way. Um, the Oh, I've got a few questions, but just while we're on the description of these beings, okay. So these three were robotic, sort of seeming, moved in unison, but they were sort of kind. They sort of, there was no ill intentions there. Okay, bluish gray skin and very brittle, very skinny. Okay. Now, what about this other being that you said had, this authority about it? Can you describe the physical appearance?
The height was shorter.
Shorter
It was
than
shorter.
these others?
Yes, it was. And the
Really?
reason why is it appeared to have like short legs. I couldn't quite see the feet for some reason, though. I don't know if it's just my brain or I can't recall the feet. The height
Mm.
was shorter. It did move with a kind of a strange. The way it walked was more of a shuffle.
Mm.
It had so the head was ridiculously large, comically large, so large that it didn't look as if it was possible.
Mm.
The skin
Was it sort of spherical, or was it like almond, like, you know what I mean?
Do you
Like
know what I
it,
mean by an old-fashioned classic incandescent light globe? It's a glass globe with a screw-on base. If you held that up,
yeah.
that shape in silhouette was the shape of this thing's head.
Okay.
And it appeared that it only had
Bulbous.
bulbous. That's the word.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
It had a bulbous head, and I estimate the diameter of the head to be about 60 centimeters across, like massive, huge, bulbous, bald, wrinkled head. And
So I'm just picturing
it,
it's two rulers in
yes,
in
two school
width,
rulers.
two
Yes,
school rulers in width,
yes,
and bulbous, and then so sort of narrowed down like the neck of a
yes,
bowl,
yes.
and then even so, it was shorter than 4 foot. Would you say it was 3 foot?
Yeah, I would say somewhere between 3 and 3.5 foot high.
And yet it commanded, I mean, I guess we're talking extraterrestrial, supernatural. These rules, our mortal rules don't apply. But see, when you said it had this air of authority, I'm sort of picturing this tall 9 foot being that's strong and overpowering, but it's still, as small as it was, it gave this very negative sort of assertive air to it.
You immediately, when is the instant I saw it, I knew that was the boss. And there was
Uh,
nothing per se, like it didn't have a sign over its head saying manager, but
mm,
I just knew that was in charge of the whole thing.
just intuitively, just the
I
energy of
I
it.
just just something I wish I could say. Uh, I just knew it. I just knew.
No,
And so
that's
perhaps it
yeah.
wasn't, and that's just what I thought. But to me, I knew that was the boss, and
Mm,
um, it it had the coolest outfit. It was a metallic orange weave,
yeah.
like super fine orange wires that were woven into a fabric. It looked cool. Looked super awesome. I would love to have a suit of that. Um,
Was it
and
skin tight?
no, it was loose fitting.
Okay.
It wasn't skin tight. It was loose fitting, so I couldn't really discern the shape of the figure of this thing underneath it. And
Hmm.
it had a metallic collar and metallic cuffs and I couldn't see any joins or any way that you could put it on or take it off.
Wow.
And the color of the cuffs and the collar was like anodized red. And
And anodized red.
yes, that's
Yeah.
how I describe it. Reflective, bright red. It looked
Wow.
awesome. It looked totally awesome.
Because that's really interesting because I have heard of these encounters where people described these beings having some sort of suit, and the logical sort of theory is often, well, it's something, it's like a protective skin, maybe when they're in our atmosphere, it protects them, and that sort of makes sense. But you're saying just on the actual spaceship, um, it was just wearing clothing that was free flowing, as if it didn't need it. Like do you see what I'm getting at? Like it wasn't like very clearly a protective skin, or it was just like clothing.
Yes. Yeah, it was.
How loose was it? Was it like a gown?
No, it would be as loose as perhaps if you wore a loose fitting t-shirt. It just hung off just a little bit.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
so it wasn't oversized and baggy. It seemed to be fitted, but it wasn't skin tight in so much that I couldn't really discern the features of the shape of the body underneath. So
Were there any symbols on it, or was it just orange?
no, it was just orange. It was, and the reason why I feel it was metallic wasn't just because of the color, but when it moved at one point, as its arm moved across its body, it made a zipping sound where, like I would imagine a mesh on mesh sound make. And that was the point where I thought, wow, that's some kind of metal. That's cool. That's so cool.
Wow.
And up until that point, I wasn't really like, that's to me, that's what it sounded like. It is a metal mesh on metal mesh as its arm just grazed its body, and I made that sound.
And so could you make out its legs and its arms like it had exposed those areas, or was the clothing covering those areas?
No, the clothes, I couldn't see the legs. I don't know why.
And you said it shuffled. It almost like
it did. Yeah, it shuffled. It didn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't a normal walk. It was like the only way I could describe it was walking was not its like natural thing. It looked like it was not that great at walking.
I've heard this very description before of beings moving around quickly as if they're kind of skipping through time or something. They're not walking, but they're not hovering either. They're kind of just zipping. Was it like a zipping fashion, or was it gliding?
How could I describe it? I could discern movement in the torso, and I'm guessing where the hips would be, as if there was some walking, but it was faster. Like if you were to shuffle, you would have to rotate your hips faster to cover the smaller steps of a shuffle. I couldn't. I don't know if it was floating for whatever reason. As I look back and try to look at the feet, I just see black. I can't see anything there. Pretty much from where the waist would be down I just can't see it. So I can't tell how it actually got around, but it did appear to awkwardly shuffle if I was to guess how it's moving around.
Okay.
And then I feel like, or if I was to like see it now, I would think that thing didn't normally walk. It would have done something else, and it was although it was moving at an acceptable pace, it didn't appear comfortable with it.
Okay. These are all really interesting details. We're sort of probably coming up to time, but I do have one final question, and and this has been unexpected. So thank you so much, because I know you have so many stories, but really getting down to the nitty gritty of such a bizarre, and I mean, I can use the word bizarre, but for you, traumatic story is has been great. So thank you so much for sharing all of this, Brock. My final question is, it's a personal one, but it relates very much to the story, and I'm only asking it because you mentioned it. What do you think they were doing when they inserted something in your testicles?
In now, I think I know, and the reason I think I know is because of events that have transpired after this. If I hadn't have had those events, my guess would be to take a sperm sample,
Mm-hmm.
and now I think I know. I mean, I don't think anybody really knows, but what I've pieced together through my experiences is that that was a sperm sample, and that there was an intention to use that sample, and we can touch on it again at another point. But
Yeah.
a little hint at that now was I think I've met the result of that, and I think about that every single day.
Brock, thank you so much for sharing that, and it perhaps got a little more personal than you first would have thought sitting down, but that's where these stories sometimes go, and I really appreciate that. We will leave it at that, because I can appreciate how emotional it must be for you as well. And only if you're comfortable, I would love to pick up where we left off at another
I would
stage.
love to come back and get all of this off my chest. Honestly, Steve, this has been a really a cathartic experience for me. It's really good to be able to get off my chest things that you normally have to keep to yourself, or
Mm,
real fear of ridicule, because people do give you a hard time for
mm,
these things. And if you come up and said to somebody, I had a traumatic car accident and this horrible thing happened to me, everybody will
mm,
say, oh, that's really, really bad. And then you can have some kind of connection with another human about sharing your tragic story. But in this case, you say something really horrifying happened to me, and somebody could literally laugh in your face. And
or
that's
put you in a psych ward.
yeah, I'll put you in a psych ward. And so to be able to sit here in a judgment free and accepting environment and talk about what has happened to me, and just be accepted, it is deeply meaningful. And I would put it to anybody that is going through this kind of thing in their life to sit down in something like this, where you can tell your story publicly and
Mm.
not be ridiculed. And it's been really helpful and healing for me to do this today, Steve. And I hope that we can continue with this, and I can get this finally off my chest.
I'm so glad that that it's had that effect on you. And look, this is it. I mean, I have a lot of I had a lot of self-doubt about starting this podcast because of what my friends would think, or old work colleagues. Oh, you've been to aliens. You know, you'd bring it up at a party in conversation. Your mates are just like, ah, come on. And then I hear a story like yours and I think, what have I got to complain about? What have I got to be scared about? You have to live with something like that every day, where you can't even go to a normal doctor or therapist. I mean, I'm aware of there throughout the world being support groups for abductees, and I'm not sure if you've looked into that in Melbourne, but I'm glad at least that this platform has been a cathartic experience for you to share. So thank you again.
Look, I think we touched on synchronicities at the beginning of this talk today, and as far as therapy and groups are concerned, this whole thing has really deeply affected my life at a very personal level, and affected my relationships. I really feel it was the main contributor to the ending of my marriage, but at the same time, it was the main contributor to the relationship I'm in now, which is one that's really supportive and understanding. And my partner has gone through as much, if not more, than I have, and we can now share our wild experiences together. And it's so everything's just so much better when you're able to be with somebody that is saying, yes, this is happening, and especially when it's happening to both of us together and we can share our experiences. And I hope that we can talk about some of those in the future as well. So there, at the end of the day, the healing isn't available conventionally through therapies or a doctor, but it is there through people that are willing to accept you for who you are and for what you're saying. And there's always going to be debunkers and naysayers out there. They exist. And quite frankly, stuff them, because you don't have to look far on the internet these days to find seriously credentialed people of the highest caliber are now saying that this is real and it exists. So if you can find somebody out there that's a naysayer that has the credibility of, say, former US presidents or people with top secret clearances in the CIA or any number of other absolutely beyond reproach positions, if you can find somebody that's more qualified than them to say it doesn't exist, go right ahead. And but all I can say is this has happened to me. This happened to me. This happened to me with other people, and I'm glad it did, because I can at least check back with them and have them say, yes, that happened. Although sometimes for them it's been hard as well. And to have now this changing perspective where some real serious heavy hitters are saying this is real, then finally I feel like I can come out publicly and say this is what happened to me, and have some way of healing from all of this. And it's I feel like at this point in my life I have a much better understanding of what has been going on, what has been happening, but at the same time everybody needs to be able to manage with these things that are happening. And coming on your podcast, Steve, has been absolutely wonderful, because I just feel immediately better having told you this, and I look forward to more and really putting this into a box finally.
And you know what, Brock? I don't know exactly when this will be released, and when it is released, there might be only a couple of dozen listeners. But the beauty of this world of YouTube and Spotify and content is that it compounds, and I have a vision of continuing to do this, and this being a successful podcast. And, one day there'll be 1 million subscribers, and many of them will want to start from the start. So just think how many people's lives you'll be affecting in a positive way, because they themselves have also been through an experience like this and feel they have no one to talk to. So,
well, for those people, I want to say it is real. You're not crazy. And anybody that says you are crazy or don't believe you clearly haven't looked at the evidence. Right? And it's on them to actually figure out what's real. And I tell you now, all of these people that are going through all of this stuff, even if just one person that's having these experiences hears what I'm saying and feels better, then that's going to make the world of difference to me, because it is real and it does happen, and you're not crazy and you're not alone.
I think that's a beautiful note to end on. Brock, thanks so much, and we'll speak again soon.
Thank you so much, Steve. I really appreciate it.